The thing I figured, we thought, look, there's 30 million people who are working remotely in the U.S. It's a huge new market. Like, there's got to be a number of people who want to live closer to nature and explore. And then, the demand, you had to come to the city to get this stuff. Now it's available everywhere. You can't have change without impact. Let's just continue this journey. And rather than going back to my apartment that I'm paying $3,000 a month from and paying like $50 to $100 a day, just how much money you kind of bleed in the city, like you can go to a place with your community and ensconced in nature.
Hi, everyone. This is Jackson Seeger, and you're listening to Season 2 of Campfire. After all, this season of Campfire seeks to understand how to build new cities. Each week, we are joined by experts and practitioners from different startup cities who will share the stories and the lessons that they have learned from experimenting with radical new models of living. Today's guest is Colin O'Donnell, founder of Kift. Kift is a co-living company that brings together van life, clubhouses in unique locations, and community for a new way to live, work, and explore. So we talk about Kift through the framework of how cities have evolved. A reminder, Cabin's neighborhoods are now open for co-living. So if you're interested in long-term co-living at beautiful locations with nature out the front door, high-speed internet, and actual campfires, you can join the waitlist today by visiting cabin.city. Another reminder, if you introduce us to a city builder and we book them on this podcast, we will reward you with some Cabin token. Colin O'Donnell, welcome to Campfire.
Thanks, Jackson. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Super big fans of yours over here at Cabin, and thanks to Phil for connecting us. So we're going to talk today all about Kift and what you all are building, but this is a city building podcast, so maybe before going deep on what Kift is exactly, would love to just hear your thoughts on like the modern city, like where it's been, where it's going. Is the city in its current state obsolete? Like what's happening with today's cities?
Well, I think we have to go back a couple thousand years and say, like, what is this city anyways? Yeah, I've been thinking about cities as this kind of ancient communication technology. It's the thing that allowed us to come together and collaborate, to work closely. We could do rapid forms of trade, sharing culture, commerce, buying and selling things. So think of it as like the city is this prototype for the internet. And it's we've seen it be chipped away over the past 20, 30 years from this new communication technology we have. So all of a sudden the internet comes along and a few easy things are chipped away. We've got music. I don't have to go to Tower Records anymore to get the latest CD. I don't have to, it's mind boggling to think that I used to have to drive into the city to look up a fact in the library or buy some music or, check out the premiere. Obviously all that stuff's moved online. And, these things that the city used to have a monopoly on are now broken. And even in the past, 5 years, the idea of remote work was kind of preposterous. We had to have high speed connectivity in the office. We had to have a LAN. We had to have went from 100 megabit LAN to a gigabit LAN and, moving files around. And so the city still had this monopoly on work. Yeah, I don't think actually COVID crushed it, but it revealed that we had seen a lot of advances that we weren't taking advantage of yet. So high-speed internet, collaboration tools, all of a sudden, working from home, while it's still kind of wild and at times miserable, it's totally possible. The last thing that's really changed, and I think you guys are seeing it too, is, we used to have transit-oriented development in cities. Now I think of it as satellite-oriented development. So Starlink in the past 6 months has gone nationwide, if not global. And the idea that now cities no longer have a monopoly on this connectivity because rural internet was not a thing 6 months ago. Yeah, so there's this really interesting change that I think we're seeing that we can talk about some of the implications, but cities had this monopoly. They had all the supply. And then, the demand, you had to come to the city to get this stuff. Now it's available everywhere. You can't have change without impact. So simple law of economics, we got new kind of unlimited access and supply. We're going to see a massive change in cities.
Yeah, it'd be helpful, I think, maybe to I assume I'm very much on Twitter, and also the first season of this podcast was very DAO oriented. Now we're more oriented around the city building part, but During the DAO piece, we talked about how there's Web 1.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0. Can cities similarly be thought of in these different phases? And if so, might you be able to outline like what are the discrete stages of how city evolution has
Yeah.
happened over time?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's this thing where you get a certain lens and everything you look at is now in this kind of focus and not but I've got a new hammer and everything's a nail. But and just for the folks tuning in from home, Web 1, we've got a server in our closet. We own all of our own data. We own all those services. We're responsible for running it. We know how the whole thing works. But we can't really scale that too well. So then we go Web 2, centralized services, Google, Facebook. No one knows, the controls in the hands of a select few. We don't own any of that responsibility. And then Web 3, we've got how it works is built into the protocol. And we can have this decentralized way of managing services and data across the internet. So cities, I think city one is really this village, and it's everyone in the village knows how to operate the village. You know all the dirt, everything that's going on. All the systems, and it's very Web 1, City 1. You own your stuff. You're responsible, but you can't scale that. You can't have a 10,000 person village where everyone knows how everything works. You have to start to get levels of abstraction, and we build hierarchy. And New York City, you got a mayor's office, city council. It's just very abstracted in this very hierarchical way, and no citizen knows how it works, and we really don't control it in any way. So I think City 3.0 is this really interesting opportunity. So what happens when the built environment? I'm struggling for words around this because I say like the city is dead, but like long live the city, because the city isn't that concrete and steel exoskeleton you see out the window. The city is the people, it's the culture, it's the community, it's the retail, it's the commerce, it's all that stuff. So City 3.0, decentralized city, what does that look like? Well, physically decentralized, but also decision making decentralized. Also, things like zoning, is that something that happens by a city council, or is that something we can decide on the fly? So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of ground to cover, and obviously, no one knows exactly what it's going to look like. But definitely think of this as an opportunity to get away from this centralized city, and there's a lot of nostalgia for it. So I don't want to be seen as this cheerleader on the side, like rooting for the demise of this beautiful thing. I lived in New York City for 20 years, lived in San Francisco for 5 years, 4 years. But I think it's kind of calling it what it is, and trying to get ahead of the challenges so that we can plan for a smooth transition if that's possible, but at least trying to anticipate like what can go wrong, and like how do we look for those quieter voices, the marginalized people? How do we look for people who don't have the agency? So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us that framework. I want to talk about how Kift is working towards this kind of future, and I'm sure that will help us get into some of the more characteristics of this future city. But first, before we go like deep into like the roadmap of the past, present, and future of Kift, would love to just give you a chance to say, what is Kift? Why did you start it? And yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, Kift is it's an answer to what comes next after this city 2.0 that we're living in. We anticipated that remote work was going to be a thing. Got started just before COVID, then COVID happened, and all of a sudden remote work was like, just everywhere. And so Kift is a way to live and work anywhere, but be part of a global community. We've started off by building a network of houses from Joshua Tree up to Washington on the West Coast. We're starting to move further east, and it's a membership model. We've discovered this hack. A couple of hacks. One is Starlink satellite is amazing and just opens up creates this massive opportunity of where you can call home or you can call office. And then the second hack that we discovered was can take a 2 bedroom house, and if everybody has a camper van as their mobile bedroom, you can roll up and overnight take a 2 bedroom house and turn it into a 20 unit co-living space. So at Kift, we really focus on the community. Uh, I've been in technology my whole career, and this is like technology is definitely a secondary thing that's serving the community here. So it's community first. We like this is more than co-living too. We're really trying to define a new way of living. We've got a DAO, Kift DAO.xyz. We use Web3 tools for proposals for governance, but we try not talk about them as Web3 stuff. We're just like, this is how we operate, and people who live here are interested in cooking dinner together. They're interested in doing yoga together. They're interested in like being there for co-working opportunities, for collaborations, for dance parties, for art, and to live in nature and to be in nature. So yeah, Kift is it's a new way to live and work remotely. um, all of your basic needs are met. So like internet, all your groceries, place to stay, use the van as your bedroom, and it's 425 a month. So it's better in terms of quality of life, and it's far cheaper than living in cities. So we think there's like this viral opportunity when that those things are met.
Definitely. I'm glad you brought up the van piece. My understanding is that's how everything got started. Could you tell us about the first Kift caravan? What happened? How many people were there? And like, what was like a moment during that caravan where you had this maybe like a moment of validation that like this
Yeah.
works and it could be something really special?
Well, the first off, like this seemed like a crazy idea, but like, hey, can I have freedom and community? Can I move around and be able to live in different places, but also be part of the community? The thing I figured, we thought like there's a 30 million people who are working remotely in the U.S. It's a huge new market. Like there's got to be a number of people who want to like live closer to nature and explore. But if we're asking them to have a van, we should start with van lifers. And so, just right off the bat, we can offer them something like great places, community, things that we're missing. And I figured that people would be interested in like, oh, I've got a shower and a place to do laundry and some reliable Wi-Fi, but I'm going to be a loner because I don't know if you've talked to Phil a lot. Community is amazing. It's the reason why, but it's been so removed from our lives that the idea of like cooking dinner together or just eating dinner together every night is kind of overwhelming. So we started off a year ago in September. Our first prototype for like how to launch a business, or how to launch a community. Like, let's before we go and buy a network of real estate, let's see if people like this. So we got 6 locations lined up, and we went kind of a couple weeks at each, up to a month at each location, and we moved 25 people together through this. And I give Phil a lot of credit for coming up with this strategy. And what we found is people came on, and within the first day, it was all about the community. We had, I think the first dinner, I was like, just kind of dropping hints. I'm like, we could cook dinner every night, and just like, we've got 20 something people. So like take 2 people and everyone cooks dinner every 10th day and we eat dinner every night. If you guys want to do that, if not, we'll just cook once a week and people can forage for themselves. There, everyone's like, no, we want to cook dinner every night. And then we want to hold hands together and we want to say like a little thing about the food and be thankful. And it went into, we've done that every night at Kift for the past year plus, every community house. It's just staggering to see how that moment of like a tiny taste of what it can be like to focus on the human things, focus on being together, caring for each other, nurturing, and, follow on. So we went from Ukiah down to Arco Santi, Joshua Tree, down out in the mountains outside of San Diego. And it just evolved into this thing where people were bringing their gifts and contributing them to the community and not asking, what do I get out of it? And so when you think about Web3, like one of the things to think about is like, what are you offering a bounty for? Is it a bounty? Is that really even a kind thing to say? What are you offering a proof of attendance token for? Because people are doing this out of the desire to be part of a community. And so they're leading yoga classes. They're getting people out the door. They're like, hey, I'm doing a hike on Saturday. Who wants to come? It went off the charts. I think there's been multiple moments where just like people have just been transformed emotionally, and other doors are open to like, hey, we don't have to live by ourselves in a sheetrock box in a city where you don't know anyone, or like neighbors don't know each other. Eating dinner by ourselves, communing with a family on TV is the closest thing we get to like social interaction a lot of nights. So
So I'm curious in because I've done a number, and we've talked about it on the podcast as well. But I've done number of different temporary co-living experiences, and a big challenge I've seen when I've been more on the organizing side is just finding the right properties. And so I'm curious in that first experience when you're doing a lot of, I imagine Airbnb with these temporary caravan model, like what you learned about what kind of property makes sense for the Kift community, and then like really from like a design perspective, and then also why does it make sense for you to now be thinking about acquiring land, and where are you in that process?
So exactly, we start off with those kind of six properties in serial, and then we have four properties that are permanent, so in a network, so you can travel between them. First off, climate has to be nice. Secondly, Wi-Fi is default standard, so we can get that anywhere. Secondly, package delivery. So people are living on the road. Many times we won't like leave the property because we've got properties that are 150 acres. So, you won't leave the property for a week, 2 weeks, but you need to get something. So package delivery is important. Flat ground is surprisingly important. So you want to have 20, 30 people in a space. You want to have room to spread out. People want to be sitting on the grass and on laptops. California presents a lot of super hilly land, which can be challenging,
Mm.
whether you're in a van or just even feeling like you're isolated on an island. And so flat ground is great. Big open kitchens. We kind of have this kitchen concept, which is like a gradient of production. So on the outer edge of the kitchen, you can have soft, comfortable seating and watch the world pass by and have a conversation with people who are preparing food. You kind of have like a next gradient in is more of like a food prep slash eating area. Think about that as your kitchen counter. So if the outside is like a couch that's near the kitchen counter, and then on the other side of that kitchen counter is that hardcore kind of prep area where there's a lot of hard metal, hot surfaces, and maybe grease spattering, but
Mm.
everyone can be involved around that. And it's such a critical part of this. Having, we take bedrooms and we turn them into conference rooms. If you need to do a Zoom
Nice.
call, it's totally private. Either do that from your room or do it from a bedroom. So that converts really easily. And over time, what we've found is that people are more, I think this is really important for just general development, but interested in spending more time outside. And we don't have to have a huge house if we have a great lawn. We have nice shade structures, little roofed areas, good lawn furniture.
Sounds great. And yeah, just thinking about like Kift as like a entity that wants to have a long that wants to have longevity to it. I imagine that it's more affordable in the long run to own the land rather than renting it. That there's like an advantage just in what you're able to do with the properties to customize them to like what you're thinking about. What's the legal structure here for the land owning part? Because I know you all operate as a DAO, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
But like, does someone who like is a owner of Kift and that they like have an NFT, do they have ownership rights over the land, or is that governed separately? And just yeah, help us understand that.
This is a classic. This is not an investment tool. This is like you're not
Yep.
buying the land. You're being a member in a club, and you're getting some say over how that club is run. We're actually staying pretty fluid right now because obviously, emerging landscape, and so we're trying to look for precedent and direction. And we've explored, the Wyoming LLC controlled by a DAO, controlled by a smart contract. DAO running that. What we're leaning towards is a unaffiliated nonprofit, and so we think this is aligned with our interests. We think if it's the reason why we want to be community funded is we think if we get a bunch of real estate development money, we're going to be squeaking out those 20% returns and trying to produce the minimal product possible. And this is like, if someone's going to own the land, we think it should be a nonprofit, and the community should be running it. But yeah, we think there's a lot of economic advantages of it. We can, especially given the new opportunities around satellite oriented development, around being able to develop anywhere. All of a sudden, places in Utah or Wyoming where there was no house before becomes possible, and then building to suit. So like we found that a lot of our members really want more outdoor kitchens, like just integrated with nature. We think that's really possible, and particularly smaller sites. We'll do a test site where we buy a very small piece of land, go through the process of doing that through the DAO, and then building, a minimal amount of infrastructure. I've started to call it like pluggable infrastructure, stuff that you can move between sites. A lot of stuff's on trailers now. We've got sauna on a trailer. We've got building
Nice.
out kind of a mobile kitchen, so we can quickly light up a site and test it out and see how we like it before committing.
Like, is there any sort of skill share that's happening on these trips in terms of like some people I'm sure have like a really sophisticated van life experience, or maybe just have like more of this innovative builder mindset, like from like a hard skill standpoint? Have you been learning anything, and do you see the
Oh yeah,
community exchanging that, and what's like an example?
there's a lot of people who have some amazing skills around van life. We've had a few women who've built out like all electrical systems, kitchens, and they're answering questions, telling us how things were built. We have some people, I think, focusing on, it's not just van life stuff. So we see mindfulness, meditation. We've got a couple of therapists who work full time as therapists. They're bringing kind of mindfulness and meditation and viewing that into everything we do. We're all picking up nonviolent communication from each other. We think it's a critical part of like
Mm-hmm.
building a strong, resilient community. We've got people who are web developers who are working on the Kift website. They're helping each other launch their own websites. We had a large number of people who are learning to DJ and learning to DJ from each other. Music, sound, celebration, dance, kind of being our authentic self is a big part of like what we think's great about cities and what we're bringing to. If you think about this as a neighborhood, we want to have everything. We want to have great cooks. We want to have
Sure.
resources we can walk into. So we see a lot of that, but definitely a lot of skill share around basics of van life. We have formalized it a bit. We've got tea times. We've got one coming up soon, I think. We've got tea time. We're just doing a lot of. This is a very curious community, and it's a community built around sharing and sharing their gifts and information. So
Yeah, and well, I love the intrinsic motivation that at least I'm perceiving from how you're talking about this. Is it entirely intrinsic? Are folks who like lead a yoga session or lead a van building workshop ever compensated? How do you think about like that, balancing that fine line between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation?
we have a couple of things. Like right now, we have opportunity for a site liaison, and that's going to be like managing, I don't know, repair person showing up, talking to the landlord. Not a lot of work, but you've got your membership covered if you're that person. So we
Mm-hmm.
have a few positions like that, but they're very, very specific, and definitely not. It's not like community, member. And so yeah, there is. I haven't really seen the compensation be a motivator. I think sometimes it's an afterthought or something. I get my hair cut from a community member, and it has been a while, so don't judge. And I might send that person a tip as on the side in Venmo as a thought of gratitude. Gifting is a big part of it, and honestly, I think there's like a parallel of a web 1 2 3. We've got a kind of capitalism 1 2 3 and capitalism of the marketplace where you knew every provider, and then we're sort of abstracted from that into an Amazon at scale where we don't know anything and don't have any control. And now we're bringing that back to a much more personal level of exchange. So
Sure.
you see, getting a lot of use out
There,
of this hammer.
Yeah, I mean, there's like this constant bundling and unbundling that I think we've seen in cities over time, right? Like John Hillis at Cabin talks about this really well. You have these technology innovations that will create some sort of huge like change in how we behave. So, like for example, the alphabet enables the city states of Greece to now like have these methods of communication that can be replicated across like different regions, and so like you see this distribution over time, and then you see like the Roman Empire with like new methods of irrigation and like just battlefield advancements come and like centralize this, and like this pattern of bundling and unbundling happens over and over again. So
Yeah, we tend to see the technology and be like, oh, the technology changed how we operate. And I really think it's like the technology is a product of society. And so society is desiring of this new way to operate. And so then we've created the tools that allow us to do it. But yeah, the same thing. So, but I think that the change was like built up, and like we really want to get away from this nuclear family, the suburbs, the don't know my neighbors, and it's like, can't we like ingrain all this, embody all these operating functions into a protocol and actually be more connected with each other?
definitely, like I think the like American dream quotes of like the single family home with the white picket fence, like to me is the American nightmare. Like I mean, I to some
Like,
degree had that like as as a kid, and like it was nice, but like I feel so much more fulfilled surrounded by people that I love and admire, and like hope for my kids that like there's way more than just like me, and that there's many positive influences in a like sophisticated neighborhood around me.
I was gonna say, like, as much as like we'll all like to kick the internet for like this, social isolation and all the problems that it brings. I think it's also, amazing to think, I also feel like such an old man, like when I was a kid, but when I was a kid, the six kids I could possibly be friends with were the ones who lived in the 2 block radius from me. And those were the only ones that I could see for, influences, role models, maybe their older brothers. It was such a very limited world. Now we're kids are drinking from the fire hose and just have like TikTok or whatever the kids are up to these days. But having access to millions of different voices, that speak more to who they are. And so, if you're a queer kid in Alabama in the '90s, like who are you looking up to for, role models for information? And now it's like that's available to you. So I think there's this thing that's happening, which is the pendulum swings one way and then the other, but we're getting to I think a hybrid plan. And I think even younger, where people always ask like, what about kids at Kift? And we're like, yes, we're a young community. We believe that should happen. We're not sure if it's the right place right now. We think there's a critical mass, but yeah, why wouldn't 10 young families get together at a location, have their kids play and grow together, and at the same time get exposed to global influences, and have those intimate human connections, but at the same time be tapped in globally?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, the cliche "it takes a village" is cliche for a reason, right? And like you have this mobile village of people, so I wouldn't be surprised at all to see kids as a part of that soon enough. I want to definitely finish the thought on, or the path we are going down on expansion strategy. You have these 4 properties now, but how are you thinking about procuring more properties? Right now, all of those are concentrated in the American West. So, are there plans to expand to the rest of the U.S.? How are you thinking about
Yeah.
international expansion? Obviously, like as a van-based community, you are kind of constrained, at least it seems to me, by where wheels can bring you. But like push back on that if there is pushback to be had, and like how do you think about crossing oceans one day?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because pre-COVID, we were thinking about how do we bring people into cities, and zoning is so much tighter here. And one of the things that we kind of played around with was like, what if we got a barge and parked it off of, one of the docks in SF, and put 50, 100 vans on it with a clubhouse, and we could actually sail it down to LA like once a month and go back and forth. So I think there's a lot of fun opportunities. Like I think that vans are, we know like the future of buildings, prefab, we want recyclable buildings. Like vehicles are actually that. They actually come with furniture built in and climate control and stuff. So they're really interesting little tiny homes on wheels. And the price of the wheels is like, it's a fraction of the cost of a tiny home. So like for a little bit more, your tiny home can transport you anywhere. That's pretty cool. But we do recognize that, some people don't have a van and they're like, I want to do this. I want to try it out. I'm not sure if it's for me. So we're starting to roll out a trial with ADU type, whether it's trailers, glamping units, or like actual accessory dwelling units around our property so that we can bring in people who don't have a van and be like, yeah, post up for a couple of weeks or a month. And, you're living out of your backpack, you can unpack and make that your own space. The thing I'm really excited about is starting to think about what it would look like if we built the sort of a kind of a beacon for this decentralized city. And what would it look like if we, what would it look like? First off, it'd be sustainable. We'd be closer contact with nature on a daily basis. We'd have plenty of room to roam about. We'd be more integrated with our agriculture. So probably on-site food production doesn't seem too hard. I think people are really interested in it. Maybe permaculture, maybe some hydroponics, other things. We think it would have music as core. We think that like there's a reason why cities have music, why, cathedrals that we built were like halls of celebration. We think we can have, you know, better means of celebration. So, building the best kind of sound system in the world, maybe having some kind of Bergheim in the woods. And we think that like bathing, wellness would be part of this too. So like you don't want to just be a depleting community that just comes to a place and parties, but think we need to celebrate, but also care for each other. So we think of a whole bathing wellness regime. So we're starting to look now for kind of this mega site, and we think there's some really interesting opportunities out there. For the price of a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, you can get about 1,000 acres in a nearby state. So it's we think it's time to start to open this up to a bigger group than just this initial core community. And we think having this place that can bring people in for a weekend, a week, a month, a season, maybe they stay for a year, and then they're like, wait, for less than $500 a month, I can have all my basic needs met, including like organic plant-based food and a dope community. Let's just continue this journey. And rather than going back to my apartment that I'm paying $3,000 a month from and paying like $50 to $100 a day of just how much money you kind of bleed in the city, like you can go to a place with your community and ensconced in nature. So yeah, that's part of our expansion plans. We also have a lot of people who are offering to bring land on. So we're starting to, as we grow the community, we're thoughtfully bringing out those next things. Continuing the caravans, we've got a group going to Baja. If anyone wants to go to Baja, we've got about 30 people so far lined up with a cool trailer with 2 Starlinks, solar panels, surfboards, kiteboards, and be driving on the weekends, co-working on the week on beaches. So starting to define this new decentralized city and just starting to do it and see what happens.
Well, I don't think there's a better place to end than that. For folks who do want to join on that caravan, where should we send them?
Kift.com, kift.com, or we're always active on Instagram, so Kift Life on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Colin, and I hope that the caravan rolls through a cabin neighborhood sooner or later.
Definitely.
And meanwhile, we will see you all at South by this year, where
For
Kift
sure.
and Cabin are going to be on a panel together and talk about network states and all that fun stuff. So we'll
Excited about
we'll
that.
reconnect then.
Cool. Thanks, Jackson.